Welcome to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. And now your host, Tim Johnson.
We'll visit with the new president of the Louisiana Mid-Continent Oil and Gas Association, Tommy Faucheux, when we return on this edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Louisiana businesses, by partnering with your local community and technical college foundation, you're guaranteed a skilled, highly competent workforce, homegrown talent, trained specifically to meet your needs, whatever those needs are. Visit this website to learn more about how to partner with your local Louisiana Community and Technical College Foundation. To better prepare for tomorrow, become a partner today.
Before you hire someone to work on your home or business, protect yourself. Go to lacontractor.org and make sure he or she is licensed in Louisiana. That's lacontractor.org for a list of over 26,000 licensed contractors. It's your money. Make wise decisions and protect yourself.
Growing up in Baton Rouge, I used to always pass up ExxonMobil, but I never thought that I would actually have the opportunity to get on. But what I thought was impossible turned out to be possible. So I just feel like it's just a wonderful opportunity to be able to provide for my family.
We are committed to being a community partner. We are actively working to recruit the talent here in Baton Rouge, and we want to bring them into our workforce. We're ready.
Louisiana has over 26,000 licensed companies that do business legally and meet the needs of our state. Before selecting a contractor, check references and verify the license at lacontractor.org. It's your money. Make wise decisions and protect yourself from being scammed.
For 8 seconds in the arena before an afternoon in the field. For a promise to students that honors success in the classroom. For championships earned on the bayou. For innovators committed to reclaiming our coastline. The Universities of Louisiana. For your future. For our future.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Tommy Faucheux, who is the new president of the Louisiana Mid-Continent Oil and Gas Association, is our guest. Buddy, welcome.
Good to see you, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Well, you were here once before, a couple of years ago, in your previous role. Now you're here in your new role. And, if you're not paying attention to the oil and gas industry in our state today, in our country, quite frankly, then you're not paying attention to what's going on at all. So let's start, though, Tommy, with a little bit about your background and the path that led you to the position you're in today.
Well, like I said, it's great to be with you, Tim. So I came to LMOGA only a few months ago, January of this year. So still somewhat new, but getting comfortable and getting set. It's a great team, and happy to be taking on the leadership role there. I started almost 20 years ago when I came out of college. I graduated from Loyola in New Orleans and went to work for then Parish President Albert Lockie in St. Charles Parish as a public information officer. Great on-the-ground local experience, but in a parish that had tremendous petrochemical industry. And then after a few years there, I joined Dow Chemical, where I had interned during college, and I spent time in their public affairs and ultimately doing a regional government affairs role there, representing them in about 14 different states in the southern U.S. Was there for almost 15 years when I decided, you know what, there may be other opportunities to make a larger impact in an industry I love, working with a lot of the same people, but just with a different perspective. At the time, LMOGA was looking for a new president, and here we are a few months later.
We talk, Tommy, to a lot of association executives on this program because the business association space is critically important to Louisiana's overall economy and the representation of those business interests. Talk to us a little bit about LMOGA, the Louisiana Mid-Continent Oil and Gas Association, its mission, its membership, and some of the things you guys work on.
So, believe it or not, next year, 2023, LMOGA will celebrate its 100th anniversary.
How about that?
So when you think about the value of the oil and natural gas industry in Louisiana, you think of it as one of Louisiana's oldest industries. And if you look at its association, 100 years old is pretty old where I come from. So we're excited to be looking ahead to that. At the end of the day, our goal, our mission is to represent the oil and natural gas companies in Louisiana. Now, you need to think about what that means. That's everyone from the big guys, Chevron, Shell, BP, ExxonMobil. It's also the large refineries. So you think about the Marathons and Valeros of the world. And then now we're talking a lot about the Haynesville Shale region of the state where natural gas is being produced. And a lot of the operators up there. And then of course LNG, which is something that's really hot in the news right now. We're representing all of those members. We are a state trade association, but because we also represent the Gulf of Mexico energy industry, I would argue many days we are in the conversations with all of your national trades. So when you think of API and NOIA and all of those at the federal level who are representing a lot of the offshore interests, LMOGA plays in that space, a very vital role in that space because of the importance of Louisiana to the Gulf of Mexico industry.
You know, you mentioned your background. You mentioned your work in St. Charles Parish. You mentioned your work with Dow for 15 or so years, and you had a lot of success in both places. Now you transition to a little, sort of still in the related industry, but a really different role, right? What's the learning curve like taking over an association like LMOGA? What are you doing day to day to get yourself up to speed?
So I'm first blessed that I'm coming to an organization that was doing extremely well. Tyler Gray and Lori LeBlanc, who were there before me, really left it in great shape. The team is great. So that makes the learning curve a little less. But there is a difference coming from a Fortune 100 company to a state trade association. The relationships take on a different flavor. The work doesn't represent one company, it represents the common interests of many companies. So that is an adjustment, but at the same time, the opportunity, and what I'm really enjoying is the fact that I get to focus just on the industry now in Louisiana. I was working across the country. Now we get to look at, quite honestly, what makes our industry great in Louisiana is that we take local pride in that. We are doing it in a way that only people in Louisiana can do. And so for me, that's personally gratifying to be able to represent an industry that means so much to the state and the people of the state.
Got about a minute and a half left in this segment, so I want to dive into that a little bit more. You are as Louisiana as anyone I know. You and I have been friends for a number of years now. We've crossed paths in a lot of different ways. Your family, St. Charles Parish, your kids, your wife, you guys there, I track your social media. You celebrate Louisiana and being from Louisiana and from St. Charles Parish as much as anyone I know. It's got to be personally gratifying to you, Tommy, now to lead Louisiana's largest oil and gas association, giving the critical importance of oil and gas in Louisiana's economy.
So you're absolutely right. Look, I am the result of generations of petrochemical industry men. Both of my grandfathers worked in the chemical industry. My dad retired from Chevron not too long ago. I was actually the first company I spoke to. I visited with some employees at Chevron here a few months back. And I got to stand in the control room where my dad worked for 30 plus years.
How about that?
And stand with those people and say, if you think this isn't personal, what you're doing, if you think you're not making a difference, then let me just tell you my story. Because of the guys who worked in this control room, days, nights, weekends, and holidays made me who I am. So it's extremely personal. It's why I celebrate it, because I think it is absolutely worth highlighting and celebrating.
Well, it's a wonderful story. I want to take a break and come back. I want to talk about your perspective, LMOGA's perspective, on the current state of the oil and gas industry in Louisiana. We're visiting with Tommy Faucheux. He's the president of Louisiana Mid-Continent Oil and Gas Association. You're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Shell, the rhythm of Louisiana.
As humankind faces its most critical challenges yet, the world demands leaders, and LSU is taking up the charge. The research we do here goes everywhere to protect communities threatened by climate change, so you can live your life with fewer worries about tomorrow. We're formulating a better way for everyone. Because at LSU, our calling is humanity.
Plants would not be operating if they weren't operating under the regulations to keep everybody safe and keep the environment safe.
It also goes back to the end products that our raw materials go into. Solar panels, windmills.
Reusable bottles. Primary product is acrylonitrile, which is used to make carbon fiber.
Carbon fiber in an airplane is used to make it lighter.
By reducing weight, we indirectly help the environment because it uses less fuel. And for us to make products that help reduce carbon footprint is a big deal.
Shell, the rhythm of Louisiana.
So, how can I help you today?
Maybe you're looking for a bigger home. Maybe you have plans to grow your business. Or maybe all your plans have just changed. For the better. Whether you're planning for the future or just looking for a bank that cares about you. If you have a goal, let's make it happen.
This is what you're looking for.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Tommy Faucheux of LMOGA is our guest. We talked about in the first segment how critically important the oil and gas industry is to the state, quite frankly, to this nation, to the globe. You're working in an industry that truly is global, right? Let's talk about the current state, though, of the oil and gas industry in Louisiana.
So the industry is doing well. Like every industry, we're in a post-COVID phase, and I think that's the best we can figure out. There will be studies decades from now on this point in global and American history. But the industry is doing well. Now, are there challenges? Absolutely. But when you think of the industry in Louisiana, 26% of the state GDP, give or take.
26% of our state's GDP.
Is the oil and natural gas industry. That's about 250,000 jobs, directly or indirectly, come from oil and natural gas industry in the state. So that is significant.
That's right.
Where are those jobs? Those jobs are literally from the northernmost tip of the state of Louisiana down into the Gulf. They're from the Haynesville Shale all the way down to the refiners and related midstream, downstream companies up and down the river in Lake Charles, to the offshore guys who are on the rigs in the Gulf. Every part of Louisiana geographically touches oil and natural gas. And so we are fighting for the industry in all parts of Louisiana. And that's extremely important, because when you go down to the legislature and you have to talk about issues that are important, not just in a post-COVID world, but at any point in time, it's helpful to have legislators and representatives who have a personal connection to the industry. And we do, because the industry is in every corner of the state.
You think about 250,000 jobs in this state somehow related to oil and gas in Louisiana. We had Mark Earhart of the Earhart Group on a few weeks ago. He is the executive director of a group I know you're very familiar with, the Grow Louisiana Coalition. And he runs advertisements on our program, but they're not about the guys that necessarily work in the rigs. They're about the florist in Houma who's got a better business because of the oil and gas industry. It's the dentist in Plaquemine who's got a better business because of the oil and gas industry. The spinoff effect of the jobs that are in that industry is significant as well.
It is. Right now, I think it's no secret, along the coast of Louisiana, we're in different stages of hurricane recovery.
That's right.
Whether you're Lake Charles from the storms there of the past couple of years, now in the Bayou and Bayou region, River Parish region, and you're looking at the effects of Ida. At the end of the day, the oil and natural gas industry, our members are bringing a lot of certainty to communities that need that, because right now a lot of the employees who service our industry are in rebuilding mode. They're trying to build their lives, put their homes back together. Schools are in different phases because of the time kids missed as they were recovering from the storms. our industry, I was down at Port Faucheux, I was in Faucheux here multiple times in the last few months. These guys are going to work all day to make sure that our industry is strong for Louisiana and the country. And then they're going home and they're dealing with insurance companies and with FEMA and making sure that they're getting their homes repaired, because at the end of the day, they have to stay there. We need the people along our coast, for example, to make the industry work. And so it does matter. It matters if not only they have their job to go to, but that their families have the local supermarket to go shopping at after work or on the weekends, that the schools are working so that their kids can get the education they need for the next generation of workers. They need to know that the basic infrastructure that is susceptible after a storm is being put back together in a way to where they can stay. And if that works for them, if they can stay in Lafourche and Terrebonne and Calcasieu and just pick your favorite parish, then they can stay and help our industry continue to grow. It's a cycle that benefits the parishes, the industries, and Louisiana as a whole.
Well, those workers, those men and women who make up the industry, critically important to, as you mentioned, both the economy and the community in the places where they live. One of the things that started, Tommy, before COVID, and we saw this going back a few years, is this whole idea of a manufacturing renaissance in America. For a long time, we were sending these manufacturing jobs to other places where we thought they could be done less expensively, right? But what we've recognized is unstable governments in some of those places, unstable working conditions, maybe not as reliable a workforce is causing a lot of that to come back. Now, as we go post-COVID, oil and gas will help to drive that manufacturing renaissance, particularly in Louisiana. Talk about that.
So if you go back to the manufacturing renaissance, if you go back to 2012, 2013, natural gas prices were lower. And a lot of the petrochemical companies, my former company included, were making major investments in Louisiana and the Gulf Coast, but we'll talk about Louisiana, because they had a reliable source of natural gas, both for fuel and as a feedstock. Those industries have continued to invest even through COVID. You go back now almost a decade.
That's right.
And we have seen continued investment in the manufacturing sector because of the production of a lot of my members. We're producing natural gas that fuels and provides for Louisiana industries, American industries. And we can have a larger conversation probably in another episode about Russia-Ukraine, but when we look at the global energy situation, Louisiana natural gas will help and is being exported as LNG to Europe and around the world. So natural gas has fueled a manufacturing renaissance here locally, and I believe will sustain industries around the world going forward as we look at global concerns, global crises, global energy markets as they change.
We'll take a break. I want to come back, and I want to talk about government's impact on oil and gas, both in the state and from a federal perspective. We're visiting with Tommy Faucheux of LMOGA. You're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Tommy Faucheux, president of the Louisiana Mid-Continent Oil and Gas Association, is our guest. We hear a lot in the media about this move away from oil and gas toward alternative sources of energy. I believe, Tommy, two things can be true at once. I've said this over and over and over on this show. I think it's important that as a country, as a society, we look at different sources of energy and how we can produce energy through those sources. But oil and gas is critically important today and is going to be critically important 50 years from now. Talk about LMOGA's perspective on these alternative sources.
So we know that through 2050, I think there's several government studies now that even if you were able to invest and produce the maximum amount, whatever that is, of renewable energy resources, assets, that the need for traditional oil and gas continues to increase regardless. So do we need oil and gas? Absolutely. Now, do we want to stop the investment and the innovation in renewables? Absolutely not. We think all of the above is needed and all of the above is wanted. If you talk to some of my largest traditional oil and gas companies, they're all finding ways to invest in either renewable technologies or just finding ways to reduce carbon emissions around their existing processes. A lot of people don't realize some of the lowest carbon oil and gas is produced by Louisiana companies in the Gulf of Mexico. That's anywhere around the world. So are we reducing carbon? Absolutely we are. We're doing it in many different ways, but it has to be done in a way where companies drive the conversation, markets drive the conversations. You don't regulate your way into this. You allow for American innovation. You allow for these companies to explore, do the R&D, invest. If we just let that happen, I think we're going to find emissions come down and jobs created here at home as companies start to diversify.
Well, we've seen it. It is the Shells and the ExxonMobils and the Chevrons and the BPs that are leading this technological and innovation from an environmental perspective all around the globe. Briefly, let's talk about the political climate for oil and gas in Louisiana. You and I were talking before the show. You said this was a relatively light legislative session for you guys. It's beginning to wrap up as this show airs on Sunday. I think the next day, on Monday, the legislative session will end. What have you been working on?
So the end is near on the legislative session, and we're all happy about that. I think, from a LMOGA perspective, it was a somewhat light session. We worked with our partners at LBIS and LCA and a lot of the other trades to make sure that business interests were front and center. And they were, and I think we're relatively happy with that. There are conversations that need to happen now going into the next legislative session as we look at a fiscal session next year. Talk about taxes never goes away. We have to be a lower cost state when it comes to tax exposure. That's important. I think there's going to be conversations around climate that come in the final year of an Edwards administration. We were a member of the governor's climate task force. We contributed to the debate. We contributed to the final plan. I think there will be needs there. So as the legislature wraps up, we will continue our conversations. We don't talk to them only when they're in Baton Rouge. Matter of fact, the best conversations happen in their districts when they go home and they spend time with their constituents. We're their constituents in those parts of the state, as I mentioned earlier as well. We'll go talk to them. It's also an election year next year. Let's not lose sight of that. And so we'll be having a lot of conversations with those people seeking office. Some of them new, some of them seeking re-election, but what's important to oil and gas in Louisiana, what's important to the future of our industry. We're gonna have a new governor. There's a lot at stake in this next year as they wrap up this term and all start looking ahead to what's next.
Well, I know you and your organization will be on top of those issues and have great conversations with both the existing legislators and the potential new ones. The other thing you and I talked about before the show was this whole idea of federal energy policy, or lack thereof, quite frankly. Talk just briefly about the Biden administration's impact on oil and gas in Louisiana and, quite frankly, globally.
So, we had our annual meeting in March, and I remember telling the audience there, this was as Russia was going into Ukraine, that energy quickly went from becoming a CNBC issue to a kitchen table issue.
That's right.
All of a sudden, everybody, as they went to the pump and filled up their car with gasoline, was talking about energy. They were hearing it as they were listening and watching the horrific scenes happening in Ukraine. So as an industry, we have to have conversations with people about what are the global energy needs. Now, the administration has made it tough of late. When you look at Louisiana's ability, because of the access to the Gulf of Mexico, to contribute to the global energy space, we are seeing headwinds from the administration because they are not moving forward on a new 5-year lease plan. Traditionally, every 5 years, there's a new outer continental shelf leasing plan. Then lease sales happen within that. That allows the companies who drill in the Gulf to start predicting, planning for the next several years worth of production. We're going to get to the end of June. There is no new 5-year plan for the first time ever. So when does that come? When do the subsequent leases come that are needed as part of that plan?
Uncertainty is the bane of any business, right? And that uncertainty is being created, particularly in the Gulf of Mexico. We got about 20 seconds left here. Quickly, your message to Louisiana about our state's oil and gas industry.
Louisianans make Louisiana's oil and natural gas industry successful. Without the people of Louisiana, who either work in the industry or live in the communities that support the industry, we cannot be successful. We cannot contribute to Louisiana. We need Louisianans to stay engaged and demand that America's energy needs and global energy needs start right here in Louisiana.
Listen, from my perspective, LMOGA could not have made a better choice than Tommy Faucheux. Congratulations on the new position, buddy. Keep up the good work.
You bet. Thanks, Tim.
That's a wrap, guys. Thanks for joining us. Join us again next week at this very same time for another edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.